Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the moonless stillness of the Qin imperial court, where even the shadows seem to bow. Outside, the air clings heavy and silent around Xianyang's palace, still as lacquered wood, but inside, torches sputter along endless corridors, cast in warped reflections on black marble floors. The ceiling is painted like the night sky, yet not even its painted stars bring peace to the man lying awake in the chamber beyond. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, the unifier of China, the living God on earth, cannot sleep. You can't sleep either. Not when you're the most powerful man in the world. And every hallway whispers your name in a tone just a little too sharp. You lie in a bed, carved from a single block of jade, chilled despite the fire roaring in the hearth. Silken sheets wrap around you like a shroud, but there is no comfort, not even from luxury. You blink. Something creaks behind the silk curtain. It's probably nothing. Probably you've commanded armies, burned libraries, enslaved millions, yet this moment, the silent, sleepless night, is where your mind finally dares to roam, not forward, like your generals, not upward, like your astrologers, but inward, where the rot lives. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while we settle in, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your thoughts circle like hawks in the desert wind. You remember your rise, how the warring states fell one by one: Qi, Chu, Yan, Zhao, Han, Wei. Their blood paved your road to the throne, and now their spirits tap at your windows, press against your paper walls. It wasn't just conquest, it was obliteration. Their kings humiliated, their families erased, their cities renamed in your image. Every unification is a kind of death. No one warns you about that. Outside your bedchamber, guards in black lacquered armor patrol on silent feet, their swords angled just so. You never trusted anyone. Not truly. Even the man who pours your tea might be plotting your downfall with a single drop. They say the Emperor's greatest weapon is fear, but tonight, it's your enemy. It clings to your breath, sits behind your eyes, walks 3 steps behind you, and never, ever sleeps. Your hand brushes the jade dragon embedded into your pillow. It's cold. Too cold. You shiver. Was that a draft? No. It's memory. You think of the first time you were called Son of Heaven. You liked the sound. It had weight. But no one told you that heaven listens. That once you name yourself divine, every bad harvest becomes a cosmic judgment. Every eclipse, a warning. You didn't just unify the states, you dared to unify earth and sky. And now both keep you up at night. There are scrolls tucked beneath your bed, forbidden scrolls, wrapped in silk and sweat. Text your own edicts outlawed. You can't help yourself. You burned them in public, but privately. You had copies made. You can't stop reading them, trying to understand what you destroyed. It's like chewing on ashes, pointless, but compulsive. You read by candlelight until your eyes burn, then read more. Some nights, you think you hear the words whispering even after you close the scroll. It's not just the ghosts of the past, it's the future, too. You're obsessed with it. Obsessed with the idea of being remembered, of being eternal. But the irony is brutal. You've built a palace so massive that walking from one end to the other takes 3 days. You've rewritten the calendar, the law, the very alphabet. You've even commanded your tomb to be a city unto itself, sealed with rivers of poison. And yet here you are, alone, eyelids twitching, unable to find peace, because somewhere in the dark, your legacy mocks you, because history does not love tyrants. It records them. It does not forgive them. The candle flickers again. You hold your breath. Was that a draft? Or a sigh? You once summoned 1,000 workers to build a whisper-free room, completely sealed, padded in clay and cotton, buried deep beneath the earth, a chamber to rest in, think in, breathe in silence. They built it. You tried it. You lasted 20 minutes before your own heartbeat drove you mad. You had the workers executed, not for failure, but for knowing you couldn't bear silence. That's the thing about power. The more you hoard it, the more it echoes. The more you hide, the more it finds you. Even now, the darkness doesn't soothe you. It listens. It expects something. A confession, maybe, or an apology, and you have neither. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang was a visionary genius or a megalomaniac with control issues so bad he once tried to outlaw the word death. But you don't care what they argue. You care what they whisper, because the whispers are louder. In your dreams, when they finally come, you often see your mother. She's not always kind. The court never forgot how she betrayed your father, nor how you rose above her scandal. But even now, even with her portrait erased from palace walls, she returns in your sleep, mouth moving with secrets you'll never quite catch. Somewhere, a gong rings for midnight, the hour of the ox, the time when spirits roam. You lie still. You think of the messengers you've sent to sea, to mountain peaks, to deserts, to find the secret of immortality. None have returned. You wonder if they ever intended to. Sleep will not come. You call for a reader, a boy barely 12. He kneels beside your bed, scroll in hand, voice trembling. He begins reciting the classic of mountains and seas, that strange old myth book you banned but can't let go of. His voice rises like smoke, stories of fish with human faces, mountains with breathing stone, a tree that blossoms once every 1,000 years. You sigh. Your eyes close for a moment. Not sleep, never sleep, but maybe rest. And then a knock on the door. Always. Just as you begin to fade. The knock is soft, almost respectful. If a midnight interruption can ever be polite, you don't answer, but someone slides open the wooden lattice door anyway. A shadow passes through the slit in the silk curtain, bows deeply, and kneels without a word. It's your chief engineer, eyes sunken, robes damp with sweat despite the chill. He smells like iron and mercury. You wave your fingers once. He rises and begins to speak, but not aloud. He mouths the words, "It's leaking again." You already know what he means. Underneath your palace sprawls a maze, a hidden chambered city, not for the living, but for death's slow rehearsal. The walls of your underground tomb have been lined with rivers of mercury. Not metaphorical rivers, actual rivers, liquid silver meant to simulate the flow of celestial waterways. You wanted your tomb to mimic the cosmos, stars above and rivers below, so when you finally rest, you remain emperor of everything, even in death. But mercury doesn't like to stay put. The metal has a mind of its own, crawling up through stonework, seeping into cracks, evaporating into air. Now, workers fall sick without cause. Slaves drop dead, eyes rolling back, skin pale and blistered. Some blame curses. Others say the tomb breathed poison. You say nothing. You just lie awake, imagining silver tides rising beneath your bed. You shouldn't know this much about mercury, and yet you do. Its taste is sharp, almost sweet. You remember the first time an alchemist dripped it into your tea. Just a little, they said, a precaution against aging. You were 28. Your gums bled for a week, but you asked for more. Historians still argue whether your mercury-laced tomb was based on mystical beliefs or just an act of glorious paranoia, but in truth, you can't even remember when the line blurred. At some point, chasing immortality became indistinguishable from engineering madness. It wasn't about living forever anymore. It was about outlasting everyone else. The engineer is still talking. You hear words like containment and pressure chambers. He's afraid to say it, but you hear it anyway. The tomb might not hold. The mercury may rise. You dismiss him, not with anger, just fatigue. You step out into the hallway. The floor's cool. A pattern of black and white tiles designed to mimic a Go board, your favorite strategy game. Sometimes you imagine you're still playing, moving pieces across the empire. But the board feels different now, and smaller, crammed, as though the world shrank while you obsessed with eternity. You walk past murals of dragons coiling through mist. Their eyes are painted with gold dust, and when the torchlight flickers just right, they seem to follow you. You pause in front of one wall where you once had a door sealed permanently shut. Behind it lies the Immortality Laboratory, a suite where no one enters anymore. Too many died. Some vanished. Others simply went mad, laughing, coughing, whispering secrets to no one. You remember one in particular, a boy genius from Qi. He claimed he could make gold from blood, light from shadow, and a pill that kept the heart from counting time. He was 15. You gave him a whole building and 70 slaves. 2 months later, he burned everything, including himself. You keep walking. You reach the courtyard, a cold expanse where the moonlight cuts like a blade. The stone is veined with frost. You breathe out and watch it curl. There, at the center, lies something few have seen. A bronze sphere carved with star maps. The earliest attempt at an armillary globe. Your astrologers told you the constellations had shifted since your rise. A bad omen. You commissioned this globe as a correction, but the stars don't obey emperors, no matter how often you redraw them. Some nights, you crouch by the sphere and trace the grooves with your fingertips. You whisper to it. Not prayers, not hopes, just questions. Am I still here? Do you see me? A servant appears at the edge of the courtyard, holding a thick cloth over his nose. He doesn't speak. He just kneels, leaves a sealed box, and retreats. You don't have to open it. You know what's inside. Another sample. Another silvery vial. Another note scrawled with strange symbols and numbers. The latest batch from the Imperial lab. You've had hundreds. Some turned to stone. Some evaporated. One exploded when exposed to sunlight. You think about drinking it anyway, not because you believe it works, but because not drinking it means you're afraid, and fear, more than death, is the enemy. But you don't. Not tonight. You sit on the low step, Pull your robe tighter and look up at the black sky. No stars, cloud cover, or maybe heaven looking away. You think back to a story a traveling monk once told you about a fish that lives forever because it forgets it exists. Every moment is new, every second a beginning. You envied it. You tried forgetting. You burned records, buried histories, but the forgetting never stuck, especially not at night. You reach for your pendant, a jade disc carved with the symbol for eternity. You wore it into battle, into court, into bed. You'll be buried with it, maybe. Footsteps approach. You turn. It's one of the silent ones, your personal watchers. They don't speak, don't blink, don't die easily. He holds out a parchment. It's a map, hand-drawn, coastal routes, mountain passes, an X marked on a distant eastern island. Another elixir seeker has sent word. You stare at it. For a moment, you imagine going yourself, disguised, vanishing into the mist. No titles, no robes, just a man, looking for peace. Then the thought passes. You are not allowed peace. You are the center of the wheel, and the wheel never stops. You rise, joints creaking. You are only 40, but you feel older than the stones that built your throne. As you turn back toward the palace, the wind shifts. A thin scent rises on it, metallic, sharp, and cold. Mercury, still leaking, still awake, still emperor. You're back in your chamber before the candle has even guttered. The flame dances, trembling slightly, as if it too is waiting for judgment. You glance at the ceiling again. Painted stars, they don't move, but tonight they feel wrong. A little too bright, a little too near. You think of the fire. It was meant to be final. A bonfire of knowledge, a purification of chaos. The burning of the books, they call it now. You had decreed that all texts not aligned with your legalist philosophy, especially those from Confucian or Taoist schools, were to be destroyed. Historians still argue whether the edict was enforced everywhere, or just used symbolically in key cities like Xianyang. But either way, the smoke rose and rose. Thousands of bamboo scrolls turned to ash. Libraries fell quiet. Philosophers were arrested. Some were buried alive. You didn't see the point in debate. The time for chatter was over. This was a new China, and it spoke with one voice, yours. And yet, the silence that followed the fire was not peace. It was hollow. Your court still held sessions. Your ministers still nodded in rhythm, but something essential had vanished. A tension crept in, one you couldn't name, like the air had forgotten how to carry laughter. Even you began to feel it when reading became memory, and memory became doubt. You startle awake again. You'd nodded off, for a moment, dreamt of fire, but not the fire of conquest or glory. It was quieter, sadder, the kind of fire that eats paper but not meaning. There's a shelf hidden behind your sleeping screen, a false panel. You push it open and withdraw a single scroll, one of the banned ones. It's a copy of the Analects, cracked and faded, the brushstrokes half erased. You unroll it carefully, fingertips trembling, not from guilt, but from need. You read a line aloud, whispering into the dark. To see what is right and not do it is one of courage. It's ironic. You have never lacked courage. You've marched armies across rivers, scaled mountains, unified a fractured land with blood and iron, and yet this little scroll, these gentle ideas, have you tiptoeing like a child sneaking sweets after dusk. You remember the day you signed the order to burn the books. The ministers bowed so low their foreheads touched the floor. But one of them, old, slow, with eyes like wet paper, raised his head and asked, "But, Your Majesty, when your grandchildren ask you why the stars no longer shine, what will you tell them? You had him executed that afternoon, but that question stayed, still does, still pierces. You get up and walk barefoot through the echoing corridors of your palace. You know where you're going? The Hall of Echoes? It's not an official name, but everyone knows it. A domed room lined with polished stone and curved walls. It was once a music chamber, before you silenced it. Now, if you whisper into the corner, your voice returns seconds later from the other side. You sit at the center, the floor is cold. You hum a single note, low and even. It returns, warmer, slower, and then a second echo, not yours. You freeze. It's probably a trick of the stone. Probably. You try it again, louder. The hum returns, but now it's distorted, twisted by curves, too many echoes, too many ghosts. Some say this room remembers every word it has ever heard, and if you stay long enough, it will start speaking back. You believe it. That's why you come here. You whisper into the floor now. Did I go too far? Silence. Then the faintest reply. Too far. Your spine stiffens. You know the room plays tricks. You helped design it. Still, some rooms shouldn't echo truth. You remember the look on your scholars' faces when the order came? Not fear, not outrage, just heartbreak. As if they knew something you didn't. You had tried to justify it to yourself, that it was necessary, that unity required clarity, that too many voices meant chaos. You weren't wrong. You were just alone. The book burnings didn't just destroy scrolls, they destroyed questions. And now, no one dares ask you anything, not even how you sleep. You don't. There's a tale, half rumor, about a forbidden library buried deep beneath the mountains of Shu. A place where outlawed knowledge still lives, guarded by monks who paint their tongues black in mourning for every truth lost. You once considered sending soldiers to find it, but the idea of what they might find scared you more than what you burned. Even now, the fire flickers in your memory, and it smells not of smoke, but of failure, of something you tried to erase, but couldn't. Historians still argue whether your book burnings were a calculated move to consolidate power or the desperate act of a ruler terrified of being questioned. Maybe both, maybe neither. You no longer know. But the scroll in your hands, hidden, fragile, and glowing faintly in the candlelight, feels more alive than any of your statues. It has survived. You haven't. A servant knocks gently at the chamber's edge. A tray of medicine. You wave them away. You look down at the scroll again, and you almost smile. Almost. In this moment, you realize something cruel. The very thoughts you tried to kill are the ones that stay with you at night. The words you silenced won't stop speaking. And that's the worst part. They're right. You're still in the Hall of Echoes when the temperature drops. It's subtle at first. A breeze brushes your robe, though no window is open. The walls seem to pulse, just slightly. You pull your sleeves tighter, but your skin prickles all the same. You know this feeling. The dead are back. not in the ghostly moaning, sheet-draped nonsense the storytellers peddle to peasants. No, this is subtler. You walk back through the corridor, and the air feels crowded, like a room that's just been vacated, where the warmth of bodies still lingers even as silence returns. You pass the statue gallery, a row of marble tributes to your greatest victories. The kings of the 6 defeated states stand frozen in mock humility, their chins lowered, their faces twisted in eternal scorn. You had these made after unification, to remind your court what disobedience looked like in stone, but you always avoided this hall at night. Because sometimes, when the moonlight slips in at just the right angle through the carved latticework, the shadows stretch too far. The king's eyes seem to follow you. One even appears to smirk. Zhao, that smug fool who made you bleed before surrendering. You crushed his army with double the force, razed 3 of his cities, salted the fields. And yet, there he is, smirking in silence, as if he knows something you don't. You whisper under your breath. You lost. The statue doesn't answer. Not directly. But your footsteps suddenly echo a second too late. You walk faster. The truth is, you didn't just conquer kingdoms. You humiliated them. You erased their names, executed their scholars, made their rulers kneel before your throne, or dig their own graves. Some you spared, some you didn't. Some begged. You never flinched. You remember the campaign against Yan? They sent assassins. Twice. The second one got close. Very close. He brought a gift. The head of a traitor general. Inside the lacquered box was a map. Inside the map, well, you still have the scar. It's just below your ribs. Thin, pale, always cold. Historians still argue whether you kept the box as a trophy or as a warning. Either way, it's in your chamber now. You run your fingers along its edge some nights, half expecting it to open again. You return to your bedroom and see it waiting on the stand. It's been closed for years. Still, every once in a while, you think you hear something shifting inside. You push the thought away. Instead, you light a stick of aloes wood incense and lie down. The scent curls upward, bitter, smoky, a little too strong. A priest once told you it wards off spirits. He died mysteriously the next morning. You close your eyes and try to summon a memory, something clean, something before all this. You're 8, maybe 9, before the throne, before the power. You're hiding under a table in your father's audience chamber, knees to your chest, listening to the ministers scream at each other. That's when you learned words can kill more cleanly than swords. You fell asleep that day under the table, and when you woke up, the air had changed. Someone had died. You still don't know who. You never slept easily after that. Back in the present, something shifts near the window. The paper screen billows slightly. No wind. No movement. But the candle beside your bed flickers out. Just like that. You sit up fast. Too fast. Silence. Then, a soft sound. Not a footstep. Not quite. More like fabric brushing stone. You know the rhythm. It's not a servant. You rise slowly and step toward the doorway. Your breath fogs the air. The 6 kings. You think, what if they really did return? You'd have earned it. You remember when you ordered the excavation of their ancestral tombs, dug them up, took their treasures, broke their bones, That night, 3 of your concubines miscarried. One of your generals fell dead in his tent with no wound. A cold wind swept through the palace halls and didn't leave for 7 days. Coincidence, they said, but you started dreaming of graves after that. Every night, a different one. Narrow, deep, airless. You'd wake choking, gasping, alive, but barely. You had your astrologers chart the stars, hoping for answers. They argued among themselves, drawing strange diagrams on turtle shells and ox scapulae. Finally, one of them looked up at you and said, "The dead are displeased. You had him executed for insolence, but he wasn't wrong. You return to your bed, sit down slowly. Something crunches beneath your foot. You lift it, a flower petal, but there are no flowers in your chamber. You pick it up, red, fragrant, crushed at the edge. You know it instantly. A plum blossom. Your first wife used to wear them in her hair. She died before you were crowned emperor. Fever, they said. Poison, others whispered. You never asked. You never had time. You sit there, holding the petal, and realize no one you loved ever stayed. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe no one sleeps beside a man who buries kingdoms. You're holding the crushed plum blossom in your palm, turning it slowly between your fingers. Its scent has faded, but memory fills in the rest. The sweetness, the way it clung to her braid, the quiet way she smiled at you before you were anyone important. Just a prince with an angry father and too much ambition in his eyes. But even then, sleep was elusive. And now, it feels like a fable. The idea that anyone, let alone a man like you, might lie down and simply rest. You rise before the dawn bell, again, always before the bell. It's the only way you can trick the night into ending. Servants bow silently as you pass. One glances up too long. You note it. Maybe nothing. Maybe not. You head to the inner court, where your personal physician waits with a tray of liquids, all cloudy, all vile. You drink them anyway. This is the part of the day that the court doesn't see, the ritual of the elixirs. Elixirs to protect the lungs, to warm the spleen, to calm the spirit. Elixirs to stop you from aging, from coughing, from thinking about dying. One smells like cinnamon, one like old pennies, and one, your favorite, burns like fire and honey. It's supposed to open the immortality gate. The alchemists call it the gate to the golden realm. You call it breakfast. You once asked how it works. The old master looked you in the eyes and said, "To ask is to cast doubt upon heaven." You didn't have him executed. You laughed. That was worse. Historians still argue whether you truly believed these alchemists or simply pretended to keep hope alive in your court. The truth? You had to believe. There was no other option. When you rule an empire, you cannot admit that you're just a man. You walk through your private garden, though garden is generous. It's a curated illusion of nature, with trees from every conquered region, brought here in tribute. A living map. You once had a mulberry tree from Chu replanted 3 times until it bloomed properly. When it finally did, you declared victory over the spirit of that land. Then you stopped visiting it. The garden is full of birdsong, but even the birds seem tense. You pause at the pond. A carp breaks the surface, eyes blinking upward. You once asked a diviner to interpret a dream about carp. He said they symbolize longevity and rebirth. Then he warned you. They also leap toward death. You had him reassigned to census duty in the western provinces. You crouch and look at your reflection. It's not the face of a god. It's a face with fine lines now, shadows under the eyes, jaw clenched too tight. You think you spot a gray hair, and your stomach flips. You make a note to summon your best wig maker. And your assassin checker. No one can know, because if they do, the illusion shatters. And once the illusion breaks, sleep is out of the question forever. You remember one night, years ago, when you wandered the palace after a particularly bad dream. A faceless boy had stood at the edge of your bed, asking, "Do you know what happens after?" You never saw his face, only his mouth, only the question. You didn't sleep again for 4 nights. That night, you ended up in the star chamber, a dome carved with constellations, rimmed with bronze mirrors, floor tiled in obsidian. You stood in the center, surrounded by light and shadow, and demanded your astrologers explain the dream. They offered charts, theories, muted panic. None dared say the word death. One said it anyway, quietly, as if testing you. You promoted her. She died a year later. Some say you wept. Some say you ordered a star named for her. You don't remember. But you do remember the question, what happens after? You've sent men into caves, mountains, across oceans, all in search of the answer. Immortal sages, hidden texts, lost islands where death is said to sleep, drunk and harmless. Some claim they found something. Others never returned. And still, you send more. You can't stop, because once you stop searching, you have to face what you already suspect. There is no after, just this body, this garden, this sleepless, endless now. You walk back inside and stop outside your map room. 1,000 pins mark 1,000 roads. Some traveled, most imagined. One road leads east, across the sea. That's where you sent Shu Fu, the bright-eyed court mystic. He was just a teenager when you picked him, but his voice was calm, and he said the right things. I know where the immortals live. He asked for ships, supplies, hundreds of craftsmen, women, artists, a floating colony. You gave him everything. He never returned. Some say he found the island and refused to come back. Others say he drowned, or built a new kingdom where you couldn't reach him. You don't know which is worse, that he lied, or that he succeeded. You step into the room, eyes tracing his last map. It's crude, smudged with seawater and hope. At the bottom, in tiny characters, he scrawled, "We must leave the Emperor behind. You keep it anyway, because it's the one thing you've never been able to do." You dream in fragments now, when you manage to sleep at all, but tonight, after the bitter elixirs and the morning's quiet failures, you drift for a few moments. You're standing in a garden again, only it's not yours. The trees are wrong. Strange blossoms crowd the paths. Purple, star-shaped, weeping resin that smells like wine and salt. A woman with no face offers you a cup. You lift it, and the liquid inside reflects your childhood. Then it burns. You jolt awake. Your mouth is bitter. You reach for water. It tastes like metal. Your hand trembles slightly, and you tuck it beneath your robe before the attendant notices. The court is in session. You're late. The room hushes as you enter. Robes shuffle. Heads bow. You sit, and your throne groans faintly. Not out of age, it's carved from living stone, but out of habit. Even the furniture seems tired of pretending. You listen as ministers drone on about grain quotas, road repairs, taxation ratios. The empire churns, machine-like, predictable, but you can't focus. Your mind is in the shadows behind them, specifically the alchemists. They're gathered again in the lower palace, near the fire pits. You ordered them to rotate shifts after the fifth collapse. Too much mercury vapor. Too little ventilation. They now work in teams of 3. One to mix, one to chant, one to test. The testers rarely last. Once, they brought you a pill, said to grant clarity of mind. You took it, spent 4 days drawing a plan for a flying palace, made of bronze and fire. The scroll still exists somewhere, tucked behind other blueprints you barely recognize. Another time, a pale woman with inked palms said she could distill immortality from lightning. She was very convincing, until her demonstration exploded half the laboratory wall and singed your cousin's eyebrows. Historians still argue whether these court alchemists were proto-scientists or charlatans protected by your obsession. Some say their experiments laid the groundwork for chemistry. Others call them state-funded dreamers with lethal access to rare minerals. You think both are correct. They live in fear of you, but you fear them more, because they whisper to one another in symbols and smoke, and because one day they might succeed. You rise from court early, citing divine fatigue, a phrase your ministers accept without question. You retreat to your private study, another euphemism. It's more cave than chamber, no windows, stone walls, damp and veined with moss. This is where the real scrolls are kept, not the official histories, the secret ones, the ones no one else was allowed to read. You run your fingers along a title, Manual of the Nine Heavens. Another, Sea Records of the Undying. You've read them all, memorized most, and yet the answers remain maddeningly vague. Drink this, burn that, fast under this moon, breathe only in darkness. None of it works. You stare at a newer scroll, its ink still glossy. One of your younger alchemists gave it to you last week, his final theory. You haven't opened it yet. The seal is marked with the character for truth, a bold move. You open it slowly. The script is small, tightly packed, frantic, equations mixed with poetry, diagrams of the human soul in the shape of a spiral staircase, a recipe for an elixir involving cinnabar, swallow's blood, crushed emeralds, and something he calls tears from the dreamless. You pause. You remember asking a physician once, "What makes a man dream?" He said it was the spirit roaming free. You asked, "What happens when the spirit refuses to return?" He didn't know. You test a pinch of the new powder, just between your fingers. It tingles, then burns. You wash your hand quickly and curse yourself for the curiosity, but not enough to stop. A knock. 3 soft raps. You answer. A servant bows, holding a lacquered box wrapped in red cloth. Another sample. You don't even ask what's in it. You wave him away and place the box among others. There are 6 now, all unopened. Part of you wants to open them all at once, mix them together, drink whatever results. Another part of you wonders if that might finally let you sleep. You sink into your chair, facing a wall of bronze mirrors, each one slightly distorted. You keep them not to admire yourself, but to remind yourself that perception is always warped. You look into one now. Your face splits slightly, as if time itself is fraying. You mutter to your reflection, "How long can I keep this up?" The mirror doesn't answer. But the silence feels like soon. You remember a phrase from a banned text. The man who chases eternity will never rest in a moment. You hated that line, mostly because you understand it. The truth is, you're tired, not in the body, though that's failing, but in the soul. You've carried an empire, a vision, a name meant to last 10,000 generations. But what if you don't want it to? You rise again, pacing, always pacing. You rub your chest where the scar still aches, not from the blade that struck you years ago, but from the memory that someone got that close. You think about those alchemists again, their whispers, their potions. They keep saying the elixir is almost ready, and you keep drinking, just in case. The moon hangs low, swollen and yellow like a dying eye. You watch it through the paper lattice of your chamber, wondering if it's really watching you back. Nights like this stretch too long. The air gets heavy. Walls seem to breathe. You feel it again. The sense that something's coming, not from outside the palace, but within. You pull on a robe and walk barefoot through the painted corridors. No guards tonight. You dismissed them all. Said you needed unbroken silence for dream communion. It sounded official enough. No one questioned it. You head toward the training hall, not for practice. You go because the floor there is made of cedar, and it creaks when someone walks behind you. It's the only place in the palace where you can hear danger coming. You learned that the hard way. The first time someone tried to kill you. It was a dancer, a court performance, long sleeves, golden ribbons, soft steps. She got within 3 steps before one of your hidden guards took her down. She was carrying poison inside a hollow hairpin. The second time, it was a physician, offered you purification salt for your morning ritual. It turned your lips blue. You survived. He didn't. The third time wasn't as clean. It was a dream. You still don't know if it was real. You were lying in your bed, just like now. You opened your eyes, and there was a man standing over you, face blank, holding a cup of wine. He said, "It's time." You blinked. He was gone, but the cup was still on your table, filled with something thick and red. You never drank it, but you kept the cup. Historians still argue whether you were genuinely paranoid, or if you simply lived in a world where everyone was actually out to kill you. The answer, as always, is yes. You pass through the courtyard of carved beasts, tigers, dragons, bears, all in mid-pounce. You had them installed to inspire fear in foreign emissaries, but now, even their snarls feel tired. The stone is wearing down, noses blunted, claws chipped. The tiger's mouth is half open. You place your hand inside it, cool, still, but not quite comforting. You look up. A shadow crosses the moon, not a cloud, a bird. You tense. When you were still a prince, your tutor once told you that a black bird flying across a full moon meant betrayal. You laughed then. You don't laugh now. You return to your inner hall and find a servant waiting, young, trembling, clearly afraid to meet your eyes. You say nothing. Just wait. He stammers. "Your Majesty, a note was found in the grain store." You hold out your hand. He gives it to you. It's short. 1 sentence, scrawled in a rough and untrained hand. The shadow lives in your house. You crumple it slowly, keeping your face unreadable. You've had threats before, whispers, rumors, but this one, it feels too close, not political, not from a rival state or a foreign agent. This is personal. You dismiss the servant with a flick. He flees like a mouse released from the hawk's talon. You sit and wait, because this is what insomnia is, truly, waiting for something you cannot name. Eventually, your chief of security arrives, a barrel-chested man with sharp eyes and a scar beneath his collarbone, gifted to him by a would-be assassin wielding a poisoned brush. He bows. You show him the note. He frowns. We've increased surveillance. Nothing unusual yet, but... He hesitates. You narrow your eyes. Speak. There are rumors. Among the kitchen staff? Of course. The kitchen. You trust no one. But cooks are the worst. They smile too easily. Their knives are always sharp. And poison? Always just a pinch away to... You order a full replacement of the kitchen staff. Again, it's the third time this year. Paranoia? Maybe. But then again, the last time you didn't act on a whisper, a concubine choked on her soup and died mid-meal. No signs of struggle. Just wide eyes and an unfinished word on her lips. You still wonder what she meant to say. You return to your quarters and notice something's changed. Not visibly, but something. The incense smells different. Too floral. You pick up the stick. It's labeled peony and agar wood. You never order peony. You send for your tester. A man enters. Middle-aged. Quiet. Missing 2 fingers from a past assignment. He kneels, sniffs the incense, and says nothing. You nod once. He takes a small breath. Just enough. He convulses before he finishes kneeling. You watch, face impassive, as 2 guards carry him away. You don't flinch. You don't mourn. You just whisper. Too late. Because the poison wasn't in the incense. It was in the silence that followed it. You pour yourself a new drink. One of your elixirs. The milky one. You don't know what's in it anymore. You've stopped asking. You sit and wait. Because sleep is now more dangerous than waking. At least when you're awake. You can see it coming. You don't remember when the construction started. At some point, the hammering and shouting of laborers just became part of the background noise, like birdsong, or wind, or paranoia. You thought it would end when the Capitol was finished, but it never ends. You always want more walls, bigger walls, thicker, taller. The Great Wall isn't even one wall. Not really. It's a messy spine of stone and tamped earth, snaking across mountains and deserts, pieced together by conquest and desperation. It devours laborers like a mouth with no tongue. You know because you ordered it built. You walk along the garden terrace now, looking east. You can't see the wall from here, but you imagine it, growing still, like ivy spreading across the empire's back. You wonder how many bones are in its foundation. Too many to count. So you don't. You turn away from the wind. It smells like snow and ash. There's a report on your table, ink still wet. A log of worker deaths, exposure, accidents, collapse, starvation. The numbers are staggering. You flip through without blinking. Your ministers told you to ignore it. That statistics are the language of the living. You keep reading anyway. Historians still argue whether the deaths were the result of negligence, wartime urgency, or outright cruelty. You don't correct them. You don't speak of the nightmares either, because they come back, not just the workers, the overseers too. Men who did as you commanded, then broke under the weight of it. One night, an overseer came to your gate screaming, ripped his own nails out, claimed the stones whispered, said he could hear the cries of men buried alive inside the wall. You had him taken away. But even now, you remember the way his voice cracked on the word forgive. The Great Wall was meant to keep invaders out. But sometimes you wonder, what if it's really meant to keep something else in? You take a cup of wine and walk to your private chamber of maps. It's not just geography in here, it's memory. A cartographer once gave you a gift, a scroll that mapped not just terrain but conquest. Each border shaded in the color of blood. The newer the conquest, the brighter the red. It glows now. Too much red. You study the lines, fingers tracing the paths where armies marched and never returned. Each expansion of territory came at a cost. Men, horses, crops. Sometimes entire villages burned so the enemy couldn't take them first. You called it unification, but it feels more like erosion. The walls inside you are starting to crack. 2. Your physician enters with a bowl, some new formula. You wave it away. He blinks. Startled, you've never refused. You tell him, "Tonight I want to remember." That seems to confuse him more. You leave the chamber and walk to the edge of the palace. A narrow balcony hangs over a sheer drop. Far below, the river curls like a ribbon of obsidian. You lean forward just enough for the wind to slap your robe. You think about the men who built your tomb. They're still down there. Some of them. Not dead. Not yet. Sealed inside. Carving chambers. Pouring mercury. Placing each terracotta soldier like a real general placing troops. You told the architects no detail was too small. The tomb must contain everything. Palaces. Gardens. Rivers. Even traps. It must be a kingdom under the earth. Perfect in every way. They tried. Then they disappeared. You issued no orders. You said nothing. But everyone knew. If they died inside, the secrets would be safe. You tell yourself they volunteered, that they wanted to serve even in death. But you know better. Service that cannot be refused isn't loyalty. It's fear with a mask on. You once asked an artist to carve the expression of eternal watchfulness into one of the tomb guardians. He did. You walked past that statue 3 days ago, and you swear it blinked. No one believes you. Of course, they say you need sleep, or prayer, or rest. But you already built your resting place, and filled it with poison. You retreat to your chamber again. Light another stick of incense. Something safe this time. Sandalwood. Old. Familiar. You used to burn it before battles. It doesn't help. The smell reminds you of your General Meng Tian, the one who oversaw much of the wall's early construction. Loyal. Unyielding. Brilliant. He killed himself shortly after your death, or so the record says. But records lie. You stare into the flame and murmur. Was it loyalty or exhaustion? The fire crackles. Doesn't answer. You think about the wall again, about how you stretched it across valleys like a scar, about the men who still walk along it, torches flickering, eyes scanning a horizon where no enemy has come in years. Maybe they guard against what you fear, not the northern tribes. But the silence inside your empire, the silence between breaths, the silence that comes just before sleep, it begins with a rumor. You overhear it whispered by 2 eunuchs outside the bronze bathhouse. They don't see you. You've taken to walking the palace in soft slippers, your presence ghost-like in the early hours. You've learned that people are most honest when they think you're far away. They speak quickly, nervously, as if even the air might report them. Another worker gone missing, one mutters. Inside the tomb? A pause. They say the inner chamber eats them, that they vanish without sound. You stop walking. You've heard this before. It started months ago. Whispers of workers who enter but do not return. Not from accident, not from punishment, just absence, and not a single body recovered. You told yourself it was nonsense. The tomb is your triumph, the great pyramid of your legacy, 500 paces long, its shape mimicking the sacred mountains. Inside, rivers of mercury, a replica of the empire, even trap mechanisms that fire arrows if disturbed. You've spared no expense and spared no labor. Tens of thousands have worked there, most never left, some by design. You once declared, "No one who knows its secrets shall speak again," and so they didn't. But now, even those who don't know the secrets are vanishing. You visit the construction site that evening, dressed plainly, your face veiled. They don't expect you. They kneel before realizing who you are. You wave them off. The tomb is massive, an underground city of carved corridors, sealed chambers, and hidden vaults. The air hums with energy, like a living beast breathing in its sleep. You descend stone steps into the lower level, where a foreman meets you, eyes wide with fear. You ask, simply, "Where was the last disappearance?" He hesitates, then gestures toward a sealed arch. There. It's called the Chamber of Rivers, a vast hall where artisans painted the ceiling to reflect the stars and poured mercury channels into the stone to mimic flowing water. The idea was yours. If the heavens are above me in life, let them be beneath me in death. You step closer. The door is marked with fresh blood, not symbolic, not ritualistic, just a handprint, long fingers, smeared downward, as if someone had been pulled in. You say nothing. The others stay back. You enter alone. The chamber is colder than it should be. The mercury hasn't been poured here yet. It's still in vats. But the air smells sharp, metallic, and wrong. You walk across the painted floor, your footsteps echoing. Then something moves, not loudly, just a soft scraping, like silk dragged across stone. You turn. Nothing there. But your breath hangs in the air now, visible. The hair at your neck rises. You call out, just once, a name, any name. No one answers. You stay 5 minutes longer than you should. That's enough. You return to the surface without speaking. The foreman looks at you, pale. You murmur, "Seal it." "Your Majesty?" "Seal it. Permanently." He obeys. Historians still argue whether you had parts of your tomb walled off because of structural instability or because you believed something inside had awakened. Some modern scientists think gas leaks from the mercury pools might have caused hallucinations, even madness. You know better. That night, you sit alone in your private meditation chamber, a small square room, no decoration, no scrolls, no fire, just stone and silence. You try to breathe evenly, you try to center yourself, but the walls seem to pulse again. And then, another memory rises, unwelcome. You remember one artisan, young, talented. His work on the ceiling frescoes was delicate, intricate. He had painted the stars in real gold leaf, one by one. He asked to see the tomb when it was finished. You refused. He smiled, bowed, and said, "Then I will carve myself into it." You laughed. 3 days later, he disappeared. They searched for days, found nothing. But months afterward, One of your ministers reported hearing tapping sounds inside the north wall of the chamber, rhythmic, steady, like chiseled a stone. You sent soldiers. They found no one. But you had that wall doubled in thickness. You haven't been back since. Now, as you sit in the dark, your fingers curl tightly around your jade ring. The stone is cool, grounding. You whisper, "It's just a tomb." But you don't believe it. Because some nights, when you walk past the sealed blueprints in your archive, one scroll feels warm to the touch. The one labeled Final Chamber, Emperor's Heart. You've never opened it, because even you fear what's inside. There was something about Shu Fu that made you listen. He was too young, too poetic, and far too confident for your taste. But when he spoke, you heard the winds change. He came to court claiming he could find the Isles of the Immortals, those mythical lands spoken of in whispers since the days before records. Places where trees bore jewels and the waters cured death. He said he could reach them. All he needed was ships, and men, and time. You gave him everything. 6,000 people, alchemists, artisans, children, concubines, even farmers, 2 great ships, and the promise that he would not return empty-handed. You watch the harbor now from a high tower, though it's been years since those sails vanished beyond the horizon. The water below is still, but your thoughts are not. You remember the last thing he said to you. "If I do not return, it means I found what you seek, and it will not follow me home." He bowed, smiled like a man with secrets, then boarded his ship and sailed east. You haven't heard from him since. Historians still argue whether Shu Fu truly sailed into the ocean or whether he simply escaped, founding a kingdom somewhere across the sea. Some even claim he reached Japan, where he became a demigod or a warlord. The truth, like the tide, changes depending on where you stand. But you lie awake, wondering if he lied. And worse, what if he didn't? You often picture him standing on some beach in a land you'll never see, sipping dew from a pearl cup, laughing at the man who gave him the world to chase a ghost. It would almost be funny if you didn't want to kill him for it. You sent scouts after him. Not immediately, of course. That would look weak. But 2 years after his departure, you dispatched 3 swift ships under other pretenses: diplomatic visits, tribute routes, inspections. None returned. You changed the topic every time someone mentioned the expedition in court, because failure is not permitted. You walk back to your scroll chamber and retrieve a package wrapped in oilcloth. Inside is Shu Fu's original map, drawn hastily, the ink already smudging. It's a child's dream scrawled in calligraphy: misty mountains on the sea, floating palaces, bridges of jade. He even wrote notes in the margins: "Bring offerings. No fire. The turtles speak at dusk." You didn't laugh when you first read it. You still don't, because part of you wants it to be true. Part of you believes he found something you never could. You remember the first time you heard the word immortal. You were a boy, standing beside your nursemaid, watching a monk walk barefoot across hot stones. He smiled the entire time, as if pain were a dream. When you asked how he did it, the monk bowed and said, "My soul already lives elsewhere." You tried to have him teach you. He refused. You had him arrested. He died without speaking another word. You were 13. Now, as you stare at Shu Fu's spidery handwriting, something twists in your chest. Not anger, not even envy. Loneliness. He had hope. You have only echoes. You call for your navigators, the best ones, not generals, not politicians, just old men with weathered hands and eyes like polished bone. You meet them in secret, in a lower chamber where the maps are inked with sea routes and lunar charts. You ask, could he have reached it? One man clears his throat. With your ships? Yes. Another adds, but surviving there? Only if he found the right place? You dismiss them gently, but your heart is louder than your steps as you leave. That night, you do something strange. You go to the Imperial docks, alone, no guards, no fanfare, just you and the scent of brine and tar. The stars reflect in the water, twisted and broken. You stand at the edge of the pier and wonder, for one foolish moment, if you could still chase him, build a ship, disguise yourself, leave in the night. The thought feels light, dangerous. You imagine yourself arriving, ragged, exhausted, only to see Shu Fu waiting for you with a knowing smile and arms spread wide. What took you so long? You almost laugh. Then the wind shifts. You hear something, not from the sea, but behind you. A voice, just one word, Emperor. You turn quickly. No one's there. Of course they aren't. The sea is silent. The night holds its breath. You head back to the palace. The moment passes. But as you walk, you whisper into the dark, if you found it, tell me how. No reply. Just the waves, lapping quietly at the stones. You never feared armies. You feared your son. At first, it was easy. He was quiet, studious, thin, like his mother. You rarely looked him in the eye, not because you were ashamed, but because it reminded you too much of before the empire, before the burning, before you buried your name under gold and stone. He called you father once. You corrected him. You will call me Huangdi. He was 8, and he never made that mistake again. You thought distance would shape him, make him sharper, stronger, but instead, it made him unreadable. He sat in the back of court sessions, scribbling notes, asking strange questions when no one else dared speak. At night, you would sometimes hear from servants that he wandered the halls alone, just like you do now, but you didn't see yourself in him. You saw a problem. It started small, intercepted letters, too many visits to scholars you had blacklisted, a certain softness in his decisions when he oversaw minor provinces. You told yourself it was youth. Then the rumors came, a conversation overheard. When the emperor is gone, a servant's whisper. He studies poisons, not policies. A report from a spy. He seeks the old texts, the forbidden ones. You wanted to believe it was paranoia, but by then, you had learned that paranoia is simply a way of seeing the truth faster than everyone else. Historians still argue whether your heir truly plotted against you or whether you projected your own guilt onto the next in line. After all, you rose through betrayal. You unified through force. You executed your mother's lovers and forced your stepbrothers to vanish. Why wouldn't your son do the same? You begin watching him more closely. You station guards at his door, not to protect, but to observe. You limit his movements. You assign tutors you trust. You intercept his reading materials. Eventually, you stop inviting him to court altogether. He never protests. That's the worst part. Because that kind of obedience, that's not loyalty. That's planning. You try speaking to him once. Just once. You find him in the garden, beneath a persimmon tree. The fruit hangs heavy, just like the air. He stands when he sees you, bows deeply, eyes on the ground. You say, "Do you love your country?" He answers, "Yes, Huangdi." You pause. Then, "Do you love your father?" This time, a longer silence. Then he says, "I love my emperor." You nod. Say nothing more. Walk away. That night, you remove your own name from the succession documents. You don't erase him. Not yet. But you adjust things. Create backup plans. Train other candidates. A nephew. A general's son. Even a gifted commoner. Bright eyes. Low background. Easy to control. You keep them close. You study them in silence. Just in case. The court begins to whisper, as it always does. Some say you're testing your son. Others think you've gone mad, lost faith in blood. They're both right. You begin having the same dream over and over. You're sitting in your throne room, crown heavy, robe soaked with sweat. Your son walks in. He bows, but this time he does not speak. He raises his head, and in his eyes, your eyes, there's nothing. No hate, no fear, just silence. He walks up the steps, takes your crown, places it on his own head, and you do nothing. You wake up shaking. You call for your physician, who prescribes another pill. This one is darker than the others. It tastes like iron. It makes your dreams thicker, slower, but not better. You begin removing sharp objects from your chamber, not for protection, because you don't trust yourself anymore. You pass your son one morning in the incense corridor. He's taller now, older, his face composed like a monk. You nod. He bows and says only, "May heaven prolong your life." You stop walking, because that blessing, when spoken with too much sweetness, sounds an awful lot like a threat. You murmur back, "Only heaven decides such things," and walk on. You spend that night awake again, not from nightmares, but from a sensation you can't shake, like something inside the palace has already shifted, a change of weight, of balance. You feel it in your chest, and in the empty hallway behind you. Sleep comes lightly tonight, and you don't trust it. You drift off sitting upright, your back against a cold pillar, incense still curling in the air, no attendants nearby, no music, just the thrum of your own heart, ticking louder than time. And in your dream, you are alone. Not alone as in abandoned, but alone as in unobserved. The court is gone. The palace is dust. Even the sun hangs still, unmoving in the sky like a painted disk. You walk barefoot across black sand, and every step leaves no trace. Then the ground cracks. From it, a tortoiseshell rises, large, ancient, slick with ink. A diviner's shell. You know what comes next. You've seen it done countless times. Shamans heating the underside of a turtle plastron with red-hot metal rods. As the shell cracks, they study the lines, claiming to read the will of heaven. One curve meant rain, another, famine, a jagged split, rebellion. You hated how uncertain it all was, but tonight, in the dream, you are the tortoise. You wake with your hands clenched and your skin slick with sweat. It's still dark. The candle has melted to a puddle. A faint smell of copper hangs in the air. Your diviner is waiting just outside the curtain. She bows low and says, "There is an omen." You should laugh. You used to. But now, your voice is hoarse. "Show me." She spreads the shell across the floor of your meditation room. You kneel, robe pooling around you like a shadow. The cracks are strange, asymmetrical, not sharp, but swirling, like water caught in a spiral. She hesitates. You snap. Speak, she murmurs. It shows disintegration. You raise an eyebrow. Of what? She doesn't meet your eyes. You don't need her to finish. Your body, your rule, your soul. The cracks don't distinguish. You dismiss her, but not unkindly. She leaves a folded paper behind, her interpretation. You don't open it, because deep down, you already know what it says. Historians still debate whether the Qin court truly relied on such arcane rituals, or whether they were merely ceremonial stagecraft to reinforce your authority. But you remember the silence that followed certain readings. You remember which ministers had accidents afterward. The heavens have never been quiet, only ambiguous. You look out at the horizon. There's a strange light, not dawn, not fire. Something in between. You call your astrologers. They arrive in haste, half-dressed, breathless. They set up their instruments, bronze globes, carved sighting tubes, tortoiseshell calendars, star maps burned onto bamboo. They begin murmuring to each other in terms the court pretends to understand. Finally, one speaks. The stars over Zhao are misaligned. Something rises. You frown. A rebellion? He shakes his head. Possibly. Or a spirit. An imbalance. You dismiss them all. Because you remember something from years ago. A scholar who once said, "The stars are not signs. They are reflections. They do not warn us. They record us." You had him exiled, and yet you still remember his face. You walk back through the Hall of Bronze, your personal shrine to order. Statues line both walls, each representing a virtue of your reign. Law, unity, power, fear, silence. At the end stands a mirror. You ordered it made from polished bronze mixed with a sliver of meteorite. You wanted to see yourself reflected as if by heaven. Tonight, the mirror's fogged. You wipe it, and see not yourself, but your son. His face flickers in the reflection. You turn. No one. You close your eyes, just for a moment, just long enough for a thought to land. What if all your attempts to delay death are the very things hastening it? The mercury, the pills, the sleeplessness, the rituals, the fear. You've bent the world around your survival until it no longer fits you. You open your eyes, he's still not there, and yet you whisper, "I forgive you." Not for anything he's done, but for everything you've done to deserve what's coming. You walk to the bed, lie down, and for the first time in many years, close your eyes willingly, and you dream, this time, not of omens or blood, but of a quiet room, a field of plum trees, and a boy walking toward you, eyes bright, hands empty. You don't speak, you just breathe, and for one moment, it feels like enough. The mountain shouldn't have moved. It's called Lee Mountain, west of your capital, its ridgeline sharp and defiant, almost arrogant. You've visited it often, mostly for ritual hunts and sacred processions. The Taoist monks say it holds special energy, a place where heaven and earth breathe through the same stone. You didn't believe that, until the mountain screamed. It began with a rumble. You were resting after a ceremonial inspection, nothing dramatic, just a routine visit to the tomb complex rising nearby, a bowl of warm rice wine in your hand, the scent of pine heavy in the air. The horizon flickered, just slightly. The earth shifted. It wasn't an earthquake. It was anger. Stones tumbled down the northern slope. Trees twisted. And then a sound, Not a roar, not thunder, something between a howl and a deep moan, rising from beneath the roots of the mountain itself. The air turned bitter. Birds fell from the sky. You froze. Your attendants screamed. The guards drew weapons, as if swords could silence a mountain. You didn't flinch, not outwardly, but something in you snapped. You ordered the camp disassembled within the hour. Back in Xianyang, your ministers argued it was merely geological instability. Shifting a plate, moisture in the rocks, a natural occurrence, the usual parade of explanations. But you'd seen something in the dirt, shards of bone unearthed by the landslide, human remains, ancient, broken, twisted in unnatural ways, and etched into one stone, a character for return. You had that stone removed, crushed, ground into pigment, but the memory remains. That night, you dream again. You're back on the mountain, but it's quiet now, unnaturally so. The wind doesn't blow, the leaves don't move, and in the center of the clearing, there's a black obelisk, taller than your palace. On it, every name you erased. You wake gasping. There's blood on your pillow. Your nose. Again. The physicians said it was the mercury, maybe, or the stress, or your mind. You said nothing, just wiped it away and poured another elixir. Historians still argue whether the incident on Lee Mountain had any mystical significance or whether it was exaggerated in later accounts. Some believe it was a localized landslide, others a carefully managed myth to bolster your image of being in conflict with heaven itself. But you remember the silence that followed the scream. You ask your diviners what it meant. They draw symbols. They speak in riddles. One says, "The mountain rose to speak and found no listener. You have him sent to build roads in the northern deserts. The tomb continues to grow. Workers are now sealing off the central chamber. Traps are being tested. Spring arrows, pressure stones, chambers that collapse inward. You approve the final plans for the Mercury rivers. Some say they will remain liquid for 10,000 years. You hope that's true. Not because you believe in eternity anymore, but because it would mean something you built will outlast you. You visit the tomb one final time, alone, no guards, no scribes, just you and the architect, an old man now, nearly blind from years underground. He bows low. You ask, "Does it breathe?" He hesitates. "It waits?" You nod. "That's enough. The journey back to the capital is slow. Your health is declining. You know it. You've stopped pretending otherwise. You cough in your sleep, wake disoriented, days blend together, but the mountain remains clear. You order new prayers to be carved on its slope, dedications to heaven, promises of virtue, warnings to any spirit that might consider returning. You still don't believe in ghosts, but you're not taking chances. The final inscription is your own, not a name, just a sentence. I was the dream you feared to awaken. The palace is full of women, but you trust none of them. They are everywhere, draped in gauze, perfumed with sandalwood, lips painted like crushed petals. They glide through corridors like shadows pretending to be silk. You remember once thinking their presence might calm your mind, might offer sleep, or distraction, or something that resembled tenderness. But in the end, they are just another court of masks. Your harem is vast, rivaling any myth. You've lost count. Maybe 3,000, maybe more. Not all are concubines. Some are spies, some informants, Some just beautiful strangers bought or gifted by minor kings, hoping to curry favor. You stopped learning their names after the first 100. Now, they all blend together. An ocean of eyes you don't trust, and voices that laugh too easily. Tonight, you walk through the women's quarter, flanked by eunuchs. The scent is overwhelming. Incense and musk, flowers and sweat. A game of kuju is being played in the courtyard by bored attendants. You catch one glance from a concubine sitting at the edge of the lotus pool. Her face is painted serene, but her eyes flick with calculation. She looks away before you can decide what to do about it. Historians still argue how much influence the palace women held in your reign. Some say your court was thick with seduction and intrigue. Others believe you kept them at such distance that they were mere ornaments. The truth, of course, lies in the cold place between desire and suspicion. You recall one woman vividly. She came from the southern states. Dark eyes, sharper than obsidian. She quoted poetry and didn't flinch when you entered once. You asked her why she had volunteered for the palace. She smiled and said, "Because I've already been someone's secret." You made her a high-ranking consort. She died a year later. Poison, they said. Or perhaps she knew too much. You pause outside the chamber where the women sleep in rows, each screened off with delicate fans and curtains. You do not enter, not anymore, because once you did, and once was enough. It was during your 30th year, shortly after the Lee Mountain incident. You walked among the beds in the dark, seeking something soft, something human. Instead, you found silence that watched you. One woman turned toward you and whispered, "Do you bleed like other men?" You don't remember what happened next, but she was gone the next day. Some of the women speak to each other in code. They braid messages into their hair, ink symbols behind their ears, pass folded petals instead of paper. The eunuchs report everything, but never fast enough. Someone is always one step ahead. You once ordered a full inspection, searched their quarters, burned letters, rotated their sleeping shifts. It helped. For a while. Then came the miscarriages. Too many. Too quickly. And not just among the women you touched, among the ones you didn't. One of the herbalists confessed. She'd mixed the tonics herself. She believed you should not leave an heir. She said it with such serenity, as if it were an act of mercy. You had her executed without trial, but you remembered her name, because she said yours as she died. Your current favorite is quiet, almost too quiet. She rarely speaks, never sings, but her touch is gentle, and she never asks questions. You suspect she's listening all the time, but you allow it. Everyone is listening. After all, at least she's honest about it. You don't sleep in the harem anymore. Not because you can't, but because you shouldn't. The last time you did, you woke with a ribbon around your throat. No bruises, no mark, just the ribbon, tied perfectly, a note tucked into the knot. Even jade can shatter. You never found the woman. You remember the fear in your advisor's voice that morning. He begged you to disband the harem, send them away, dismiss the risk. You refused, because letting them go would be worse than keeping them close. Better the dagger you can watch than the one you can't. And besides, aren't they just doing what you taught them? Isn't survival just a version of conquest? You walk back through the corridor. A child sings somewhere in the distance, high-pitched, lilting. It echoes strangely against the stone. You stop walking. You don't allow children in the inner palace. You turn. No one is there. Of course. You stand a moment longer, then whisper, I know you're still watching. You're not sure who the message is for. Your women? Your enemies? Or the ghosts wearing perfume? You return to your chamber alone? As always. There's a sound that no one forgets, the gasp of an entire court drawing breath at once. It happened the day the sky went black, not at night, at noon. The sun had climbed high over the central courtyard. You were holding open audience, hearing petitions from border officials and tribute bearers. It was hot, oppressively so, and the light bounced off the golden tiles like polished brass. Then, without warning, the light dimmed. A hush fell. You looked up. The sun had vanished. Or rather, it was still there, but masked by a black disk, a circle within a circle, like the pupil of some cosmic eye. A solar eclipse. You knew what it was. Your astrologers had predicted it, whispered it rather, as if by saying the date too loudly they might call it down too soon. They said it was natural, but your court didn't see nature. They saw judgment. In ancient times, an eclipse was not an event. It was a sentence, a sign that heaven had turned its face away, that the emperor, you, had lost the mandate. You could feel the eyes on you, searching your expression, wondering what crime had tipped the balance. You remained still, but inside, something churned. You gave no orders that day. You simply stood as the world darkened and waited for the sun to return. It did, but the fear lingered. That night, your chambers remained brightly lit. You told the servants it was for reading, but really, you just couldn't bear the dark. Historians still argue whether that eclipse marked a shift in your mental state, if your paranoia deepened after it, or if it was simply one more omen piled onto an already sleepless soul. You didn't sleep that night. You didn't sleep the next night either, because something changed after that shadow passed over the capital. Not just the sky. People began to vanish. Not in crowds. Not with noise. But one by one. Quietly. A maid who'd served your tea for 10 years. A record keeper who transcribed your thoughts. A perfumer whose oils you favored. Gone. No resignation. No funeral. Not even a rumor. You asked your ministers. They bowed lower than usual. You asked your guards. They swore tighter patrols. You asked your spies. They gave you names. All wrong. You began keeping lists. Not of the missing, but of the too present. The ones who looked a little too calm. Who smiled a little too easily. Who stopped sweating around you. You began to suspect that your court had been hollowed out and refilled with masks. You'd see them in the reflection of your tea, faces behind faces, flickering just below the surface. So you changed your routine. Different chambers every night. Random meals. No announcements. No favorites. And yet, they always knew where you'd be. Even now, standing in the Hall of Seasons, you feel watched. The murals shimmer faintly, depicting spring winds, summer fields, autumn hunts, and winter frost. But the figures seem to move when you don't look directly at them. One fox has eyes just a little too human. You approach it, reach out. The paint is dry, smooth, but you step back anyway. You ask your dream readers to interpret the eclipse. They try. One says, the shadow represents the past reclaiming the present. Another says, it was a celestial veil, a warning. You are meant to be forgotten. You exile them both. But the words follow you, like smoke that seeps under doors. In private, you begin sketching symbols, circles within circles, sun swallowed by night. You ink them on parchment, press them into wax, fold them into your sleeves like talismans. You speak to no one about it, but the fear grows limbs. One morning, you find a jade pendant on your pillow, shaped like an eye. No note, no explanation. You throw it into the fire. It doesn't burn. You watch it glow, then crack. You send for your astrologers again. They arrive, faces pale, robes unkempt. You ask, when will the next eclipse come? They consult their charts, fingers trembling. One finally answers, not for another 11 years. You nod, then whisper, let's not wait so long. He doesn't ask what you mean, but he looks older when he leaves. You look to the sun more often now, not with reverence, with suspicion, as if it's planning something behind your back. By now, the palace has become a mouthful of secrets. You can feel it in the walls, whispers curling in the seams like smoke. Every pillar watches you. Every door seems to pause just a little too long before closing. You used to believe you could hear footsteps coming. Now, you're not so sure they ever stop. It started with the statue, one of the Terracotta soldiers, not from your tomb, but from the prototype gallery in the northern hall. You had commissioned dozens of test figures before approving the final mold. Expressions, armor, stances, even facial hair variations. Each one handcrafted, each face unique. You know every detail of them. So when one of them turned ever so slightly, only an inch, just a change in posture, you noticed. The overseers swore it hadn't moved. The sculptors were questioned. No one confessed. But the soldier's gaze was no longer forward. It was tilted, left, as if watching something over your shoulder. You had it shattered. The next morning, another one had shifted. You didn't say anything that time. You just stopped walking down that hallway. The walls have ears. That's what the old phrase says. But now you think they have mouths, too, and maybe teeth. You begin seeing patterns in the wall carvings, twisted dragons forming characters, phoenixes with tail feathers shaped like eyes, vines that seem to spell out names you've tried to forget. You order the walls repainted, twice. It doesn't help. There's a story the servants whisper when they think you're not listening, about a mirror deep in the palace that doesn't reflect your image anymore. They call it the Emperor's truth. You ask to see it. It's just a mirror. Polished bronze. Surface dull from age. You stare into it for nearly an hour. You see your reflection. And behind it, movement. Just for a second. You blink. Only your own face again. You have the mirror removed. Not destroyed. Just taken somewhere far away. You don't need proof. You need silence, but the silence is crowded now. Every servant is a suspect, every concubine a whisper with legs. You stop speaking unless absolutely necessary. When you do speak, you whisper into fabric, muffle your voice against your wrist, cup your hand like you're holding a secret too sharp to be seen. One morning, your personal attendant enters holding a sealed scroll. He bows, sets it before you, and waits. You do not open it. You just look at him. His face is calm. Too calm. You nod. He vanishes before nightfall. The scroll turns out to be blank. Not a threat. Not a message. Just empty. Worse than words. You begin to believe there is someone among your staff who knows everything before it happens. An informer? A spy? No, that's too simple. It's something deeper. You suspect the palace itself. You order sections of the palace walled off, hallways closed, wings sealed. You redraw the map of your own home every week. Still, someone always knows where you are. Historians still argue whether these actions were signs of your mental decline or an elaborate test to weed out disloyalty. But none of them lived in a house where even the candlelight seemed to lean closer when you weren't looking. One afternoon, you find a folded piece of paper tucked beneath your pillow. No handwriting, no seal, just a crude drawing, a figure in robes, face blank, standing in a room full of doors. All the doors are open. The figure stands still. You stare at it for hours. You keep it. Tuck it into your sleeve like a charm. That night, you instruct your guards to seal your bedroom from the outside. You want no entrance, no exit, just you and the cold air and the flickering candlelight. For once, it feels peaceful, until the candle dies, not flickers, dies, and you hear a voice, not outside, inside the room, your name, not Huangdi, your real name. No one says that name anymore. You rise. No one is there. Of course. You whisper to the walls. You already have everything. They don't answer, but the echo sounds like a sigh. You still remember the scroll that started it all. It was called the Map of the Immortal Path, sent by a wandering mystic who claimed to have once served the court of Chu. You never met him, only heard his name spoken once, during a court session, by a eunuch whose tongue slipped and was removed the same afternoon. The scroll arrived wrapped in crimson silk, inked in a silver pigment that shimmered like mercury in moonlight. It was beautiful, too beautiful to be true, and that's why you kept it. Unrolled. It showed no landscapes, no roads, no rivers, just curves, swirls, concentric circles forming a spiral toward a vanishing center. At first, you thought it was abstract, a riddle, perhaps. But the court mathematician, a gaunt man with eyes like carved wax, pointed out that the curves aligned with constellations only visible once every 100 years. It wasn't a map of places. It was a map of when. That night, you dreamed of yourself walking inside that spiral. Not rushing, not hesitating, just walking, and with each step, the walls became mirrors, then shadows, then light, then nothing. You woke with the taste of copper in your mouth. You ordered copies of the map made, 5 scribes, 5 different versions. Each one came out slightly different. One spiral leaned left, one right, one never completed. One bled into a drawing of your own tomb. The 5th scribe disappeared before he could deliver his. His rooms were empty, except for a pile of white ash. You had the ashes sealed in an urn and placed beside your alchemist's station, as a reminder of what you weren't sure. You showed the map to your scholars. Most shrugged. One wept. She claimed the scroll was cursed, said the pattern wasn't human, that it was a trap laid out in geometry, a path you could enter, but never leave. You promoted her. She took her own life 3 weeks later. Historians still argue whether this immortal map ever truly existed, or whether it was a metaphor invented by later dynasties to explain your descent into obsession. Some say it was a lost Taoist cosmograph. Others insist it was just a decorative riddle meant to entertain. You still have the original, hidden inside the double wall behind your sleeping chamber. You don't need to look at it anymore. It's memorized now, burned into you. Your alchemist tried to follow its instructions once. Mixed powders, at the intervals noted. Laid stones in a spiral on the floor. Walked the pattern under a red moon. 2 died. 1 emerged mute. The last simply walked away. You never found him. But some nights, when you pass the western wall, you hear footsteps pacing slowly, precisely 13 steps. Pause. Turn. Repeat. You know the rhythm. You saw it once in the scroll's margin, scrawled by an unknown hand. 13 steps is enough. Enough for what? No one knows. You ordered the walls sealed, but not before walking the pattern once yourself. You don't remember the end. You just remember opening your eyes and realizing 2 hours had passed. Your servant said you stood still the entire time. You never spoke of it. But afterward, you began sketching symbols onto every surface. Your table, your robe cuffs, your fingernails, tiny spirals, little gates, every doorway, a possible exit or entrance. You started to fear circles. Not visibly, not openly, but you noticed them everywhere. The shape of a bowl, a drum, a moon, an eye. You cover the mirrors in your chambers now. Say it's for humility. Say it's because you dislike the vanity of reflection. But really, it's because you saw your own eyes once, reflected back, and they weren't blinking in time. You ask your mapmaker if there is a place in the world with no geometry. He stares at you, says nothing. You release him from service. Because the answer is no. There is no escape. Only spirals. The stable boy refuses to go near your horse. He doesn't say it aloud. Of course, no one does. But you see how they avoid the stall, how they whisper about the animal behind your back, as if the creature is something other than flesh and hoof and muscle. But you know better. You've had the horse since your 35th year, a stallion, dark as burnt tea leaves, with eyes like polished obsidian. You named him Thunder Without Rain, a tribute to his silence, his speed, and the way he always knows where you'll go before you decide. Lately, though, he won't sleep. You noticed it first on a hunting trip. After a long ride, your horse usually lowers his head and naps, twitching in dream stillness. But this time, he stood, all night, unmoving, watching. You dismissed it, until it happened again, and again. One night you entered the stables alone and found him restless, pacing in a perfect circle. His breath steamed even in the warmth, his ears pinned back, muscles coiled like a bowstring. When you reached to stroke his mane, he flinched, not from fear, but recognition. You whispered, "You know too, don't you?" He exhaled sharply. You never spoke of it again. Historians will not write about the horse. They will document your wars, your laws, your tomb, but not the beast who stood at your door each morning like a sentinel of instinct. But you remember, because now, when you cannot sleep, neither can he. You sometimes wonder what he sees that you don't. Horses don't dream, they say, or if they do, it's only of fields, herds, simpler things. But this one, he watches the palace windows, watches the moon, watches you. Last week, one of the stable boys swore he saw your horse bow when you passed. You beat him for lying, but you didn't ask which direction the horse was bowing. You dream now of hooves, of running, of a shadow across the steppe, wind snapping your cloak as the world falls behind you in silence. You wake with your legs twitching, chest heaving, as if you've been galloping for hours. You order a portrait made of Thunder Without Rain, not a grand oil painting, just a small ink sketch. Simple lines, quiet posture. The artist asks if he should include your hand, resting on the reins. You say no. The horse rides alone. You take to visiting him more often now, at night when the stars hang low. He always knows you're coming. He doesn't move when you enter, doesn't whinny, just watches. You talk to him, not about war, not about the court, just silence. Sometimes you think he listens better than your ministers. One evening, you bring him a slice of pear. He eats it slowly, deliberately. Then he turns and nudges the gate with his nose. Just once. A gesture. An invitation. You don't follow, not yet. But the idea stays with you. What if you rode out? No guards. No declarations. No destination. Just vanished, leaving the empire behind like a cloak dropped in the snow. Let the ministers wonder. Let the historians speculate. Let your son write whatever ending suits him. Would they search for you? Would they build monuments? Or would they pretend you never left? You laugh softly. Your horse twitches his ears. That night, you stand over the saddle in your private chamber, just looking at it. The polished leather, the golden studs. The stirrups you never quite adjusted. You run your hand along it and murmur, maybe one day, but not tonight, because tonight there's a meeting, a secret one. You gather your most trusted alchemist, your inner astrologer, your head of security. You tell them quietly, if I vanish, let no one know. Let the world think I am still here. They blink. They nod. They do not ask why. And the horse waits, in the dark, eyes gleaming like a prophecy you haven't read yet. The day begins like any other, but you feel it, something pressing behind your ribs, like the air itself is trying to remind you of something you've forgotten. The court proceeds as always, endless reports, the scraping of ink on bamboo, the wet cough of an aging minister who refuses to die. You nod, you wave, you scowl, all the usual gestures, but your mind is already far ahead, planning a journey only a few will ever know happened. The night before, you gave final instructions. The sealed cart is prepared. No fanfare, no banners, just 6 hand-picked guards, all mute by training, all loyal to you beyond reason. You chose the route, southward first, then east. Avoid the main roads. No lights at night. No stopping in towns. Your death will be reported tomorrow. You decided that in advance. You even drafted your own death edict, signed with your jade seal. It will be delivered by a courier who doesn't know what he carries. The edict says you died quietly in your sleep, attended by physicians, surrounded by loyal ministers. It's a good lie, better than most truths. Historians still argue whether your body was truly in the cart or whether it carried a decoy, while you rode ahead in disguise. There are tales of a fisherman who spoke ancient court dialect, a mountain hermit who owned a mirror etched with your imperial crest, a merchant in the West whose robes were always too fine for a trader. They never found you, Porkjaw. Of course, because they never looked hard enough, or because they weren't meant to. You step into the cart just after dusk. The guards close the doors. A slow creak, then the latch. The darkness inside is full and warm, and for the first time in years, you exhale without calculation. It smells of cedar. The walls are lined with scrolls, not government decrees, not battle reports, just poems, old ones you banned. One reads, "When the bell stops ringing, do not wait for silence. Walk." You smile at that one. Outside, the procession begins. Quiet wheels, oiled axles, no horseshoes, just the hush of dust rising behind you. The capital disappears without a sound. You close your eyes and dream of the ocean, of Shu Fu, laughing on a distant island, of your horse, galloping over hills you'll never see again, of your son, stepping into a throne still warm. You left him no instruction, only the silence you wore like armor. By morning, you are far from Xianyang. The cart has not stopped. The guards say nothing. They don't need to. You peer through the slit in the wood. Mist. Endless fields. No roads. No markers. Just space. You wonder how long it will last. If this will be your final journey, or if the road is circular, and this is simply another spiral of the immortal map. Your fingers curl around a pouch at your side. It contains a single jade token, the one shaped like a crescent moon. It's a calling card, or maybe a ticket. To what? You're not sure. You don't ask. You just lean back, close your eyes again, and imagine what it feels like to be forgotten, not mourned, not remembered, just gone. You fall asleep in the cart for the first time in years, and no one wakes you. The tomb is sealed, not with fanfare, not with trumpet blasts or rows of weeping courtiers, just earth, shoveled by hands, too tired to feel fear anymore. You are already inside, or so they say. The mausoleum, your grandest creation, your last empire, it hums beneath Lee Mountain like a sleeping beast. No one dares go near it now. Not the laborers who built it. Not the guards who once stood watch. Not even the priests who were paid to bless it. They left quietly, each one murmuring that something down there never stopped breathing. They were right, Below the surface lies a palace of stone and shadow, a ceiling painted with constellations, as if the sky itself were inverted and held in your palm. The floor is a map of your conquered kingdoms, etched in obsidian. The rivers flow with mercury, slow and bright and deadly, and in the center, a coffin, cedar wood, gold studs, a lock sealed with your personal cipher. Is it you? Historians still argue. Some say your body was placed there, entombed with treasures, concubines, traps, and silence. Others claim the cart was empty, that it was all theater, that you escaped across the ocean to live in obscurity, laughing at the fools who came to mourn. You never told them, because the point was never the truth. It was the idea of you that mattered. Immortal, not in flesh, but in doubt, somewhere deep underground. The Terracotta army stands guard. Thousands of clay soldiers, all staring forward, their backs to the gates. They do not blink. They do not breathe. But if you stand there long enough, you might begin to think they're waiting, not for an enemy, but for you, to return. You left them ready. You left everything ready. The tomb is rigged with traps, arrows that fire without warning, rooms that collapse under a single breath, poison hidden in scroll tubes and incense burners. You designed it all, not just to protect what you built, but to make your story too dangerous to disturb. And it worked. No one has entered since. They fear the tomb. They revere the silence. You've become both legend and threat. A question with no answer. But the truth? You're tired. If you are there, sealed beneath that mountain, then you are no longer moving, no longer whispering, no longer clawing at maps or swallowing elixirs or checking doorways for shadows that don't belong. And if you are not there, If you escaped, then perhaps, in some mist-drenched valley or quiet fishing village, you finally found something resembling peace, not eternity, just absence. Maybe that's what immortality really is. Not living forever, but being impossible to end, and in that way, you've already succeeded, because the world still turns around your silence, even now. So here you are, at the edge of breath and story. The lanterns are low, the halls are quiet. The palace that once buzzed with footsteps and whispered betrayals has softened into memory. The great wall still rises across mountains. The tomb still sleeps beneath Lee Mountain. And your horse, if he's still alive, probably stands quietly in a stable somewhere, still refusing to blink. You close your eyes now, and feel the layers of time settle gently around you like ash. You are no longer an emperor, no longer a hunter of ghosts or seeker of strange maps. Not even a father. Not really Nana. You are just a name the world doesn't know what to do with. A shape in a mirror that might move when no one's watching. A thought that rattles when the sun disappears too quickly. There's peace in that, and no more advisors. No more poison testers. No more strange dreams or shifting walls or statues that seem to breathe. Just breath, in and out. Let your muscles soften now. Let the garden gates swing shut behind you. Let the shadows walk where they please. You've earned your rest. You no longer have to chase the end, because you've already become it. And that, maybe, is enough. Sleep well now. And if, by chance, you wake to find your name still whispered across the centuries, smile. You did it. You never disappeared. You just became legend. End of script. Sweet dreams.